It was 11:47 on a Friday night when I called my boss from a federal holding room and asked him to come get me. The phone had been sitting on the metal table for 20 minutes. The screen cracked from when it hit the concrete floor during the search. And the duty officer, a woman who looked like she'd processed every variety of human disaster this city had to offer, watched me dial with exactly zero expression on her face. Sterling Vane answered on the second ring. That surprised me. It was nearly midnight on a Friday, and even Sterling, who treated sleep as a scheduling inconvenience rather than a biological requirement, occasionally went offline. But his voice came through clear and unhurried, like I'd caught him mid-sentence. Vane. I opened my mouth. For a moment, nothing came out, which was embarrassing, honestly. I had rehearsed 6 different versions of this call during the 40-minute drive to the federal field office, sitting in the back of an FBI sedan between 2 agents who smelled like burnt coffee and institutional disappointment. I'd settled on direct factual, no editorializing. "It's Delaney," I said. "I'm at the FBI field office on Wilshire. I need you to come get me." The silence on his end lasted 4 seconds. I counted. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Charged?" "Not yet. Detained for questioning. They're calling it voluntary cooperation, which we both know isn't voluntary when they show up at your apartment at 9 p.m. with a warrant." Another pause. I heard him moving, the quiet sound of a chair scraping back, a door. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, he said. "Don't say anything else to them." "I know." Delaney. "I know, Mr. Vane. I've read the firm's legal protocols." He made a sound I couldn't interpret. "I'll see you shortly." The line went dead. For the record, I am not the kind of person this happens to. I am a forensic accountant. I have a CPA license, a graduate degree from Georgetown, and a personal color-coded filing system for my tax documents going back 11 years. I live in a studio apartment in Silver Lake with excellent natural light and a very reliable internet connection. My most dramatic Friday nights involve the farmer's market, and possibly, if I'm feeling reckless, a second glass of wine. I had been working for Sterling Vane's private equity firm, Vane Capital, for 3 years and 2 months. My official title was Senior Forensic Analyst. My unofficial title, which the partners never said to my face but absolutely said in the conference room when they thought the glass was thicker than it was the Bloodhound. Because I found things. That was my job. I went into the financial architecture of acquisition targets, and I found what didn't belong. The discrepancy buried 6 layers deep in a subsidiary's accounts receivable. The intercompany loan that circled back on itself. The pattern in vendor payments that only revealed itself if you stared long enough and happened to know what a kickback structure looks like from the inside. I was quiet. I wore blazers. I drank green tea at my desk and rarely spoke at meetings unless I had something specific to say. I had also, over the last 8 weeks, built a comprehensive forensic dossier on Aldous Fenn, the firm's CFO and Sterling Vane's second-in-command, that would make a federal prosecutor weep with gratitude. That part was the relevant part. The agents who showed up at my door had been very polite. They'd shown me a warrant authorizing them to take my personal laptop and to request my voluntary cooperation in an ongoing financial crimes investigation. The warrant listed my name as a person of interest in connection with a wire fraud scheme running through 3 of Vane Capital's acquisition targets over the past 18 months. My name, not Aldous Fenn's name, which was the name that should have been on that warrant, mine. I'd gone with them without a scene. I'd locked my apartment, texted the firm's general counsel office, and gotten in the sedan without touching the doorframe because I had watched enough procedural television to understand evidence contamination. On the way, I had time to think, and what I thought was this: Aldous Fenn was smarter than I had given him credit for. Sterling arrived in 22 minutes. I know because the duty officer's computer made a soft sound when his name came through the front desk system, and I'd been watching the clock since I hung up. He came through the security door in a dark suit jacket over a charcoal t-shirt, which meant I'd caught him mid-evening, not mid-sleep. He looked exactly the way he always looked, like the room had been waiting for him to enter it and was now organized around his presence. 6'2", dark hair, a jaw that seemed specifically designed to make people feel they were being evaluated. His eyes found me immediately. He crossed the room, pulled back the chair across from me, and sat down with his elbows on the table. He looked at me the way I looked at a ledger that wasn't balancing, systematic, thorough, covering every line before drawing a conclusion. "You're okay," he said, not a question. "I'm fine. The warrant listed you specifically." "Yes. Wire fraud, 18 months. I read it carefully in the car. I folded my hands on the table. It's not me. You know it's not me. Someone spent a significant amount of time and sophistication constructing the appearance that it is." Sterling's eyes narrowed a fraction. "Who?" I looked at him. We were in a federal field office, and I was aware that saying Aldous Fenn's name in this building without documentation in hand was the kind of move that turned a bad situation into a catastrophic one. "Not here," I said. He read that immediately. He stood up. "I'm arranging the attorney retainer tonight. You're released pending review. Don't speak to them again without counsel present." I wasn't planning to. He looked down at me, and for a moment I couldn't categorize his expression. Not pity, not frustration, something with more weight to it. "The car's outside," he said. "Let's go." Los Angeles at midnight looks like a circuit board lit from underneath. I'd always thought that. I was watching it through the tinted window of Sterling's SUV, while his driver, a man named Cruz, who had the particular energy of someone who had made peace with unusual hours, navigated the freeway toward downtown. The partition was up. Sterling sat at the far end of the rear bench, one arm resting against the door, watching me with the same quality of attention I'd seen him give an earnings report that wasn't adding up. I was still in what I'd been wearing when the agents arrived. Dark slacks, a blouse, one heel slightly scuffed from when I'd hurried to the door. I hadn't had time to change, and I was aware of looking exactly the way I felt. Scraped. Not broken, but scraped. "You're cold," he said. "I'm fine. Your hands are folded like you're trying to keep them still." He was, unfortunately, correct. My hands give me away when the rest of my face doesn't. Occupational hazard of being someone whose emotional expression has been trained into stillness by years of sitting across from CFOs who didn't want me finding what I was looking for. He picked up his jacket from the seat between us and dropped it across my lap without asking. I considered arguing. I decided it wasn't worth the energy. "The warrant wasn't a coincidence," I said. "I know. The timing matters. The Hartfield acquisition closes in 9 days, the firm's largest deal this calendar year. The due diligence package has my signature on it. If I'm under a federal cloud when that deal closes, the acquiring party has grounds to void the representations and warranties clause. The deal doesn't close. Vane Capital loses the management fee." $62 million, Sterling said quietly. "Yes, someone wanted me discredited before the close. Getting me out of the picture was the secondary benefit." I smoothed the jacket across my knees with my left hand. The primary benefit was making sure I couldn't finish what I was already doing. The city lights slid across the dark interior of the car. Sterling was very still in the way that powerful men sometimes are. Not the stillness of someone with nothing to say, but the stillness of someone who has learned that silence is sometimes the most aggressive move available. "Tell me," he said. So I told him. I told him about the pattern I'd found 6 weeks into the Hartfield due diligence, a series of intercompany transfers running between 3 of the firm's portfolio companies that didn't match the authorized transaction records. Small amounts individually, significant collectively, designed to look like normal liquidity management, the kind of thing you'd miss unless you were specifically mapping cash velocity across entities, which was not technically part of my assignment. I'd been doing it on my own time, lunch breaks, Saturday mornings, the kind of quiet, methodical work that takes weeks and produces a spreadsheet that, to anyone who didn't know what they were looking at, would appear to be a very boring document about intercompany loan balances. To someone who did know what they were looking at, it was a roadmap to $14 million in misappropriated funds, traced back to accounts controlled by Aldous Fenn. "Aldous," Sterling said. It wasn't a question. His voice had gone flat in a way I hadn't heard before. He's been doing it for at least 2 years. The structure is sophisticated. He used the firm's acquisition activity as cover. Every time we brought on a new portfolio company, the integration period gave him a 6 to 8 week window where money could move without triggering internal controls. By the time controls were fully implemented at the new entity, the pattern was buried in historical data. You have documentation. A complete forensic package. Every transfer, every counterparty account, every timestamp, annotated and cross-referenced. I paused. It's on an encrypted drive at my apartment, which the agents didn't find because it isn't in my apartment. It's in a safety deposit box at the Chase branch on 3rd Street. Silence. You've been building a case against my CFO, Sterling said slowly, for 6 weeks without telling me. I wanted to be certain before I brought it to you. Accusations against a C-suite executive require an evidentiary standard that doesn't leave room for doubt. I wasn't going to put something on your desk that I couldn't defend in front of a jury. He looked at me for a long moment. Something was happening behind his eyes that I couldn't categorize. He found out, Sterling said. He must have. My access logs at the server level are clean. I was careful, but I accessed a document archive that only Aldous and I have clearance for. I was looking for the original transfer authorization records. He would have gotten an alert. So he moved first. He had someone at the FBI field office with enough to open a preliminary inquiry. He probably used the same intercompany's transfer records I was already analyzing, reframed to implicate me. It's elegant, honestly. I'd admire it if it weren't directed at me. Sterling made a sound I also couldn't categorize. He looked at the roof of the car. Cruise, he said. The partition lowered. We're going to the Biltmore, not the office. Yes, sir. The partition rose. I looked at Sterling. You don't need to. You're not going back to your apartment tonight. If Aldous knows you've been building a case, he knows your apartment is the first place to look. And you said the drive is at Chase, which means you are currently the only person who can access it. I was, at this specific moment, the sole custodian of the only evidence that could bring down his CFO before Hartfield closed in 9 days. He didn't say that. We both understood it. All right, I said. The Biltmore in downtown LA smells like old money and fresh flowers, an aggressively calming combination that felt surreal at midnight with dried coffee on my sleeve and a federal inquiry with my name attached to it. Sterling had a standing reservation on the executive floor. Of course he did. He ordered room service without asking. I ate without arguing, because it turned out being detained for 3 hours, and then delivering a comprehensive briefing on financial crimes in the back of an SUV burns through whatever you had for dinner. He made calls, quiet, deliberate calls I could only hear half of, firms outside counsel, someone at the SEC's regional office, and at least one call that ended with him saying, I don't care what time it is, in a tone that closed the conversation immediately. By 1:30 a.m., he set the phone face down. The board convenes at 8, he said. Emergency session. I need the forensic package in hand before then. Chase opens at 9. I know people at Chase. Of course he did. Then we have a window. If we can present the complete documentation at the board session, we can move to place Aldous on immediate administrative leave, pending internal investigation. That triggers the representation warranty protections in the Hartfield purchase agreement. The deal stays intact. Sterling looked at me. You already mapped this out. I started mapping it when I got in the FBI car. I set down my fork. You don't have to retaliate directly. You don't have to make a scene or start a war inside the firm. You let the documentation do what it was built to do. The numbers will remove him. You don't need to. He was quiet for a long moment. Walk me through the board presentation, he said. So I did, with a yellow legal pad from the hotel desk, and a pen with the Biltmore crest on it, drawing the transfer map from memory because that map had been living in my head for 6 weeks. The entities, the dates, the amounts, the beneficial ownership chain that led back to a Delaware LLC, that led back to an account in Aldous Fenn's wife's maiden name. Sterling listened without interrupting. He asked 3 questions, all of them precise. He absorbed the answers the way he absorbed everything. Completely, without visible effort. At 2:15 a.m., he set his pen down. "You're presenting this," he said, "not me." I looked up. "That's not standard protocol for." "You built it. You know every number, every entry point, every counter-argument Aldous will raise when he realizes what's happening. The board needs to hear it from the person who found it." He met my eyes. "And Aldous needs to see that it was you." I understood what he meant. It wasn't just a legal presentation. It was a statement about what I was and what my position in the firm actually was. I had been sitting 3 floors below the executive suite for 3 years, filing my analyses in folders with his name on the routing slip, never once sitting at the board table. Sterling was saying that was about to change. "I'll need a suit," I said, "and my reading glasses are at my apartment." "We'll handle both." He stood. For the first time since the field office, something shifted in his posture, not relaxed, but different. A pressure valve releasing by 1 degree. "Get some rest. Crews will be downstairs at 6:30. He moved toward the door. "Mr. Vane." He stopped. "He chose me to frame because I was invisible to him," I said. "He thought the forensic analyst in the corner was a useful tool, not a threat. He thought I was tracking what I was assigned to track." Sterling turned around slowly. He looked at me across the room, the legal pad covered in my handwriting, the hotel pen, me still in my scuffed heel, and something moved through his expression that I didn't have a name for yet. "I know," he said. That was his first mistake. Aldous Venn arrived at the board session at 8:02 a.m., looking like a man who had not yet received a memo he was expecting. He came in wearing his usual uniform, navy suit, pocket square, the particular ease that belongs to people who have never worried about the outcome of a room they walked into. He saw me. I was sitting at the board table, not along the wall with the assistants, at the table with a leather portfolio in front of me, and a stack of printed exhibits organized by tab. The color left his face with a speed that was almost instructional. Sterling opened the session from the head of the table. He stated the purpose, then he said my name. I stood up. 45 minutes. Every entity, every transfer, every timestamp, every account in Delaware, every beneficial ownership structure, every email pulled from the archive, Aldous thought was secure. I presented it the way I'd been trained to present forensic findings, without effect, without editorializing, with the precise and methodical cadence of someone laying out arithmetic. 2 + 2, every time. Aldous interrupted twice, the first time to dispute a date. I produced the server log, the second time to question my access authority for the archive. I showed the board the authorization record, which had his own signature on it from 18 months prior, when he'd granted me clearance during the onboarding of a portfolio company that had since become the most thoroughly documented evidence trail in the case. He stopped interrupting after that. The board voted to place Aldous on immediate administrative leave at 9:04 a.m., pending referral to outside counsel and voluntary cooperation with federal investigators. Security walked him out. He didn't look at me when he left. Sterling's office is on the 43rd floor, floor-to-ceiling glass on 2 sides, the kind of view that explains why people build towers. I had been in it exactly twice before that morning. After the board cleared, he told me to follow him upstairs. He poured 2 glasses of water from a carafe on the credenza. He handed me one without being asked. "The Hartfield deal is intact," he said. "Yes. Aldous's counsel will try to negotiate. Cooperation with the SEC in exchange for reduced exposure. That's the play. It makes sense. He has knowledge of the counterparties on those accounts. The SEC will want that more than they want him." Sterling set his glass down and crossed his arms, leaning against the credenza. He looked at me for a long moment, the thorough, systematic look I'd seen him use in the boardroom, but directed at me personally rather than at anything I was presenting. 3 years, he said. "Yes. You sat on the 40th floor for 3 years. That's where the forensic team is located. You caught a $14 million embezzlement that my internal audit team, my outside auditors, and 2 compliance reviews missed entirely. I considered how to respond to that. Your compliance framework is well designed for external threats. It wasn't calibrated for someone who helped design the compliance framework. No, Sterling said. It wasn't. A pause. I owe you an apology. That surprised me. I didn't let it show. For what? For not seeing what was in front of me. He said it plainly, without performance. You were filing your analysis in routing folders and sitting against the wall in presentations, and I was reading the conclusions without looking at who was writing them. That was a failure of attention on my part. I looked at him. Most people don't notice quiet. I should have. The room was very still. Outside, Los Angeles moved in its usual indifferent sprawl, 18 million people entirely unconcerned with what was happening on the 43rd floor of this particular building. There's a position, Sterling said, that I've been trying to fill for 14 months, Chief Risk Officer. The candidates I've interviewed have either the strategic range or the technical depth. Not both. He held my gaze. You have both. I kept my expression level. My pulse did something it was not supposed to do. That would be a significant change in scope, I said. Yes. I'd need full visibility into every active deal and every portfolio company's internal reporting structure. Yes. I'd report directly to you. Yes. And I'd need to be in the room, I said, not against the wall, at the table. Sterling almost smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who had just confirmed something he'd already decided. That's the job, he said. I looked down at the water glass in my hands for a moment. 3 years of being the person who found things and filed them under someone else's name. 3 years of green tea at my desk and quiet calculations and knowing the answer before anyone had finished asking the question. I hadn't planned for the 43rd floor, but I had planned for what came next. I'll need my own executive assistant, I said. Someone who can manage SEC correspondence alongside internal reporting. Done. And I'll need authorization for the offshore entity registry before Monday. I want to complete the review, Aldous interrupted. Sterling straightened up. He looked at me the way I suspected. He looked at very few things in his life, with something close to uncalculated respect. Monday, he said, you'll have everything you need. He extended his hand. I shook it. His grip was firm and his hand was warm, and he held it a beat longer than a handshake strictly required, which I noticed and chose not to examine in that particular moment. Monday morning, Cruz pulled the car to the main entrance of the Vane Capitol building at 7:50 a.m. Sterling was already inside. He was always already inside, but he met me at the elevator bank in the lobby, which was not something he had done in 3 years, and we rode up to the 43rd floor together. The executive receptionist looked up when the doors opened. She had the carefully neutral expression of someone recalibrating very quickly. Sterling walked toward his office. I walked beside him, not behind him, not trailing with a tablet and a routing folder. Beside him. My new office was adjacent to his, separated by a glass wall and a door that locked from my side. Desk was clear. Encrypted workstation, standing monitor, and a view of the city I was going to have to actively work not to get distracted by. On the desk, a single key card, full building access, every floor, every system, every archive. I picked it up. Dell, Sterling said from the doorway. I turned. He'd started calling me that sometime between the hotel and the board session, a shortening that had arrived without announcement and apparently intended to stay. I noticed I didn't mind it. He was looking at me with the same quality of attention he'd had when he said that was his first mistake, something behind it that wasn't entirely professional, and that neither of us had addressed directly. The Meridian Capital file is on your system, he said. Their CFO's background has gaps I want mapped before the preliminary call Thursday. I'll have it by Wednesday morning. Tuesday afternoon. Tuesday afternoon, I agreed. He nodded once. He started to turn back toward his office, then stopped. For the record, he said, without turning fully, the forensic team on 40 is excellent. They're going to notice you're gone. They'll manage. I know a beat, I meant it as a compliment. He went back to his office. I sat down at my new desk. I pulled up the Meridian Capital file, opened a fresh analysis template, and typed my name in the header field. In the field labeled position, I typed 4 words I had not typed before. Chief Risk Officer, Vane Capital. Then I got to work. There is something people don't tell you about being underestimated for a long time. It isn't only a disadvantage. The people who look past you also in the same motion show you exactly how they operate when they think no one important is watching. Aldous Fenn spent 2 years building a $14 million fraud right in front of me because he had decided I was furniture. He handed me his entire methodology every time he let me into an archive he didn't think I'd understand. I understood all of it. And now I had a key card that opened every door in this building, a desk with a view of the entire city, and a man in the next office who had finally stopped looking through me and started looking at me instead. I don't know exactly what comes next. I've learned not to overplan things that are still in motion. But I know the numbers, I know the structure, and I know that in this city, in this building, in this particular room, the most dangerous person was never the one with the corner office. It was always the one who knew where every dollar was buried. I've always known where to look.